Welcome back to the NoFX podcast. Sorry, again, it has been a little bit of a hiatus, but I've been working on some stuff in the background to make some big changes. I'm not going to announce anything just now, but you'll know soon enough if you pay attention to the channel. Either way, this episode has kind of been a while coming because we spoke to the man, the myth, the legend, Joey here, that was going to join us for a discussion on the podcast. And I spitballed it with him like a couple months ago, I want to say. And then, it's kind of gotten to the point where one thing happened, this thing happened, another thing happened. So we put out a couple other episodes and, well, here we are. So this time around, we wanted to talk about Storm as a mechanic, as an archetype. And this may be something that might become a series. We were just kind of spitballing about that a little bit too. We might end up covering the other archetypes, similar to how we've been covering enchantments and spells and creatures and all of that good stuff. So keep an eye out for that stuff, or we'll let you know if that's what's coming. Either way, what we like to do here, or what I would like to do in general if we have guests, is to do the same thing that we did in our inaugural episode where Kirk and I explained our Magic histories, so you can get to know how a person got from point A to point B with the game that we all play. So without further ado, Joey, thank you for joining us, and tell us how you got into Magic.
All right, yeah. What's up? I'm Joey. I'm actually a math teacher. I live, near Philadelphia, and I got into Magic through a friend. Actually, he introduced me to Commander specifically, and we played a few games, probably in 2017 or so. Never really got a full deck myself until probably a few months after that. I got a Lord Windgrace precon, I think, when they launched, and that was kind of my first actual deck. But yeah, then started playing
2018 precons, I think.
I believe so. Yeah, I think they were 2018. Yeah, so it was a while later that I actually ended up getting a deck for myself. But I played around with my buddy a little bit and his friends, and then I started going to my LGS once I got my own deck. My deck was pretty bad initially because it's a precon and I didn't really know how to upgrade it. So, I went through that whole thing, kind of raw with the people at my LGS, and then kind of found online Magic not long before the pandemic hit, probably the summer before, or August, September of that fall right before in 2019, before everything hit the fan. And that's where I found Islane was on Play EDH back in that day before it really blew up pandemic times. So
yeah, that was really Wild Westy kind of then.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was only probably 100 people on the server. There's really not that many. It was very small when we first joined, and we were playing a lot on there. We knew pretty much everybody that joined games. It's crazy to see it explode the way it did. It was a great place to play a lot of games, even when we left. I'm sure that people still play a ton of Magic there, but yeah, it has definitely changed a lot from those early.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started, it was
days.
Me and I ran into Joey. I want to say Q was one of the first people.
Right, yeah.
There was a couple other guys that started servers and we played with them, and then they just disappeared off the face of the earth. I think pandemic really just opened up people's doors to doing the online thing, but then at the same time, as soon as the pandemic ended or they had to go back to work, those doors shut just as fast as they opened, and those people moved on with their lives. Either way, we did make some long-lasting friends. That I've known Joey for going on 5 years.
Yeah, going on 5 years now. Literally just from running into each other a bunch of times on that small community of Play EDH back before that thing really blew up.
Yep.
And still go to my LGS every once in a while. I play more online, I think, than in person, which I kind of that's a good thing and a bad thing because I have good friends that I play with online in Islane and the play group we have. But also I'd love to get out in my store more because I do actually like that environment. They help me a lot, especially when I first started.
I would love it if I had one, but it just doesn't exist. That's local. I mean, it's local, but around an hour drive. No, I'm good.
I don't have that excuse, so.
I'm spoiled for LGSs. Omaha has a ton of great ones, so I'm spoiled for them.
I had a lot more around me when I lived out in LA, and I had just gotten back into the game, and I started going to some of them, and I had some fun and whatever, but then I moved to a smaller town, and there's a card shop, but it's just they don't do anything. Like,
yeah, they don't have tables set up for you.
they have tables, but it's like it's tiny, and there's like 2 tables over in the corner, and like I've walked in there and seen like people playing Pokemon and shit, but I've never once walked in there and seen anybody say or mention anything about Magic. I've asked the guys, had conversations, like, you know, they have a Facebook page and shit. I'm like, man, come on, get the word out there, like get some people involved, like do a tournament or something. And they're like, yeah, and then nothing ever happens. So
yeah,
I'm sticking with webcam unless I move again at some point.
I mean, you also get such freedom being able to play with Moxfield now too. I think that's really also been able to open up my ability to brew. So
for sure,
there's a lot of like benefits to playing online, and I feel like we have a play group online the same way I have a play group in person. So like a LGS environment in person.
Yeah,
so
I'd agree. The main issue is just like different time zones, so like coordinating can be kind of a pain sometimes, but generally most of us are around and available in the later afternoon on my server, and you know, we've been able to get pretty solid groups of people going over the years. The main issue has always been keeping them active. Like, some people will disappear. I mean, you even did it. I did it. Like, we all took like 6-month breaks where we're just like, I'm not really playing. Sorry.
Yeah, and that happens with Magic. I mean, it's like one of those hobbies that I don't think it ever really goes away unless you really, really make that decision to cut it off. But people take breaks, and nowadays, like a couple months, 6-week break, you can really miss a lot of stuff. You know,
you're not wrong.
Yeah, these products are coming out so fast.
It is
even since we wrote the notes for this episode,
spoiler.
it's like it's like we don't have anything about Bowmasters in here, I don't think, and I think that's like that spoiled like right after we did these show notes.
Yeah, we did these show notes. We talked about it at length during the podcast where we talked about Lord of the Rings, but it wasn't even a thought in our mind yet.
Right. But yeah, I mean, since then, I just play. I pretty much, like I said, I play at my LGS. I play with you guys, and my forte really is like more aggressive decks. Getting into CEDH specifically, I kind of, and I think you'll remember this. I had an Elsha deck that was kind of too strong. It was using the top combo with her, and a cost reducer, and I had a lot of redundancy with the cost reducers.
I remember that, like in our earlier time online. We were kind of straddling the line of like, oh, this is high power when it probably was pushing CEDH, and then other people were like, oh, this is high power, and it was probably kind of pushing more casual, and we hadn't really figured out how to define that ourselves. Obviously we've made the distinction a lot better these days, but back then, you know, we'd still be running a Mana Crypt in a high power or a mid power deck, and you know, that's probably not correct.
I don't know. Sidebar aside of all that, that's the thing that's the best about CDH is not having to have some bullshit rule zeros discussion. You just fire a game away and go. Anyway.
Yeah.
I
think it's really fun to be able to just be like, okay, I'm going to build Flame War and I'm just going to play it in a CDH game and I'm just going to like throw everything I can into it. And I know these guys aren't going to hold back on me. Like, you know, it's not going to be an unfair fight.
Yep.
Oh, I've loved being able to brew and bring random shit to the table too, and then having it work and be like, oh yeah, you know, cool. And then sometimes even then it still gets shelved because you're like, yeah, that was fun the one time, but it does the same thing XYZ deck does, so move on. I mean, I brewed so much shit out of like the whole last Phyrexian block, as much as they don't want to call them blocks, it was a fucking block. That's the MTG boomer in me speaking. So
a lot of people want to bring it back, so they should be happy.
I think block sets were great. At least 2. I liked 2 to 3 per. But anyhow, the Phyrexian whole set, like I brewed so many damn decks out of that thing. Kirk too. We did a bunch of different streams and games and whatever with all these new cards. I retired almost all of them already because they were fun, gimmicky decks that I'm just like, I'm not gonna actually ever want to seriously play this thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I had that Elsha deck, you had Zur, right? And you still had that put together. And then our friend Alex
I've been thinking about bringing Zur back.
Deck, and Anala was still a powerhouse back then. It was still.
Anala's still. I mean, it's still on the database. It still sees play, just not as much.
No, it's a wildly good deck. Yeah, it's
you should 100% bring back Zur. By the way, that deck's awesome.
That deck. I think it's grown a lot too. I honestly think that like you can play it so many different ways now.
Yeah.
There's kind of more latitude.
I don't know that I would. Well, then they've also added in. Well, I guess we should probably save this for later because we might talk about Xur, and I can think of a few things that have come out that help the build along. Basically, what I used to be doing, but even more stuff. So yeah. So then at some point, I guess to wrap up your history, I know you.
We just broke into full CDH, so
we did that, and then I started a channel.
I never really looked back. Yeah.
Yeah, well, here's a good question. When's the last time you played a casual game?
Not that long ago. We played a couple with Mac, probably this year, I think. Like, we played...
You were on the stream with me and Sage, and...
yeah.
I don't remember who our fourth was, but...
Yeah, I played that Zavala deck. That deck was pretty busted.
I just played kind of recently with Lord of the Rings stuff, but...
I have a cat deck that I play often at my LGS, and I fucking love that deck. It's really, like... It's really dumb. It's just
who the hell is your commander of your cat deck? I gotta know.
It's the tribal one from 2017.
Yeah, it's a
Rabo. The same one that Edgar Markov came out in. The same set of decks.
It does a thing. I mean, like I generally can punch for a lot of damage. It's just
it is like the definition of an aggro deck, and it has the same failings that an aggro deck does, but it also pretty reliably smashes face because in casual people aren't running the amount of interaction.
I'm running the companion that like makes all my creatures be cats.
Kahira or something.
Yeah, Kahira. Yeah, I went hard on that deck. That deck's fun.
That's kind of like my Joda list. Like me and Joey fucking put a ton of time into honing that thing into free stuff tribal, and it just goes. You give it any room to go, and it goes. And then people are like, "What the fuck just happened?" I'm like, I
also have a mono green Titania list that I love. It's the old Protector of Argoth, the sack lands for elementals, and I punch face with that deck a lot in casual games.
Got a buddy that plays that in a CDH brew, and it actually is kind of potent.
Our buddy Mike does that. He has a CDH Titania, and it's really, really good. Very fun deck to play against.
There's a lot of cool shit out there. The problem is that I like playing casual against people who brew like the way we do, to where they're hyper optimized casual lists. Like they may not have like 0-drop rocks or free counter spells, but they like have such a depth of synergy and just everything like works together so well because you've honed it in, and they just do shit. That's why I've canned most of the casual decks I have because they didn't have that. So the ones I could find where I could do that, like my Dragon's Approach list or my Joda list, like they just go, and I love that about them.
Yeah, 100%.
That's actually a conversation I had recently with the Squeeze Knees, who has also been on your channel a couple times, who's on my Discord and other stuff. But brewing casual is beautiful. I love doing it as long as you still play competitively. My God, that is the spirit that needs to stick with everyone and anyone playing the game. Play whatever jank crap you want. Just play to win.
Right.
Yeah. Play competitively.
Don't play group hug.
Yeah.
That's one that will not be in a... If we do that series, I'm not covering group hug because fuck that archetype. Sorry.
I enjoy the challenge of like playing against somebody who's going to play their cards to the best of their ability. I think that's like, I want to play against good pilots.
Well, and
whether it's casual,
absolutely,
it's fun.
Kind of ties in with the whole proxy thing too, right? Or the Moxfield thing too, because you want to play this player's skill, not their money. So,
yeah, I mean that's the entire joy of Magic is you're trying to win a game. If you're not, then I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and if you can't win because you can't afford a $300 card, like that's kind of not fair. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's the community. That's what it's been doing, and that's what it's kind of come together to say is okay. Like, how many people do we know that were like, I don't proxy that now proxy, or that were like, I don't know, and then they're like, yeah, fuck it. At this point, like it's not like Wizards isn't making their money, so.
I feel like proxying, like just for like the convenience sake, because everything's coming out so fast, is like that's the biggest reason to now. Is like I can't even get these cards fast enough.
Mm-hmm. I've like literally the last couple products I bought were I got some of the what was it Dominaria remastered or whatever the fuck it was. It doesn't matter. I bought a few packs like at the beginning of this year. I bought that Japanese artists Secret Lair, the black and white ones that has the Doomsday in it. I bought that specifically for the Doomsday, and then I bought the Frazetta one. That's the last shit that I've bought, and to this point, I don't feel bad. I don't have the money to go spend hundreds of dollars on that shit every month. Like, and it's literally almost every month there's a new set. Like, we just got Commander Masters. Eldraine's already almost done being spoiled. There's already another 2 things that are going to come, a Doctor Who and something else that comes out before the end of the year. It's like, man,
I was so pissed. I was so pumped to buy the Lord of the Rings Secret Lair because I fucking love the cartoons and the cards in it were dog shit. So that sucked.
Yeah, I mean that's half of the problem too. Hey, we are getting way off topic. So
yeah, we are.
Let us quit rambling. Let me reel it in a little bit. Okay. From here, normally we would jump into housekeeping. We can't do that today because there were literally no comments. So make sure that if you're listening to this video, tell Joey he's handsome and let us know what you think about whatever the hell
you can compliment my hair.
Yeah, I mean, his new perm, it's looking fantastic. We all love it. So without any more bullshit, let's get into the topic here. So this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart and is why I brought it up in the first place, or maybe I didn't. I don't recall exactly how it got brought up, but it was something that I immediately thought about bringing Joey on for because we've discussed Storm inside and out for years. Also, the channel I run is called The Possibility Storm for a reason. It's not because I love the card. It's because I wanted something with Storm in the name, and I wanted it to be a reference to Magic, and there you go. So, yeah, I mean, I don't always play Storm decks, but Storm is basically my favorite archetype as far as I like to slam down a bunch of shit turn 1 and then do something else turn 2 and then just win on turn 3 or turn 4 or turn 5, depending. I mean, even some of the more recent decks that I play are Storm in a sense that they're like a good example would be Evelyn. Uses Worldgorger Dragon. It's effectively a Storm deck because it is doing multiple actions throughout a course of time. And you know, other decks, even my Sithis list is Storm in its own sort of way. So like most of the decks that I like even Tivit is kind of a Storm deck. It's just casting you extra turns over and over, but like it's doing that thing infinitely till you win the game. I mean, so
you're definitely like storming off in the beginning to put down a bunch of mana.
Right.
That's
well, to start it off, Lane, do you want to just define Storm for us, or what the actual definition is?
Yeah, so let's define Storm as a mechanic first, so that everybody knows what we're talking about. So, generally speaking, Storm cards will be a spell, instant, sorcery. Are they all instants? Or
there's creatures as well, I think. Isn't there an elemental or something that has Storm?
Anyway. Now you're testing my fucking knowledge. I have no idea. Scryfall to the rescue. I thought they were all spells, but either way, I mean, there's literal memes.
Storm, you know? There's
literal memes based on this that there's a Storm scale, and like if it's more busted than Storm, it should never be printed. Kind of shit. So
yeah. Anyhow,
Storm cards will have the keyword Storm on there, and sometimes reminder text as to what that does. Every Storm card will have, generally, obviously a mana cost and then an effect. And then that effect is copied. So they make copies of themselves based on the amount of spells that were already cast in during that turn. So, for example, Grape Shot is a 1 red mana instant that says deal 1 damage to target. If in a turn, somehow it got to there being 15 spells being cast prior to that Grape Shot that you put on the stack, it's going to do 16 damage to the table or targets as you see fit. And that's because it also counts itself. So you just have to remember that the Storm card itself is a copy, and then every other thing that was cast before that. And that's what it's going to do. Grape Shot is one example. There's like Squirrel Storm or whatever that makes a bunch of fucking squirrels based off of it. There's ones that let you exile a bunch of shit. Flusterstorm is a bunch of copies of Counterspell or a taxing type Counterspell. So on and so forth. There's a ton of them.
The other thing is it's usually on these cards it's a trigger. So like there is a Storm trigger, and then as soon as that trigger resolves, all the extra copies go right onto the stack without any extra casting.
And it is particularly frustrating, if you've ever played against Kark and Sakashima, you'll know this, that a lot of times when those things get copied, or I even had a really shitty experience against Zada the other day, where I guess I shouldn't say
Attack
shitty, but just an experience against Zada, a normal everyday experience against Zada, where Zada said, "I'm going to do this," and I was like, "Okay, I cast Vines of Vastwood on Zada so that it won't work," and they're like, "No, all those triggers just went on the stack. You just countered or stopped me from being able to target the once." And yes, it had hexproof. It did slow them down slightly, but they still ended up winning. They didn't win that turn, but they won the next turn. So, regardless, cast triggers are something you always need to be mindful of, because if there are copies of any, and that goes for any copies of anything ever, that says anything that says copy on it, the copy is going to go on the stack first, and then the original will go away. In the case of Crocs Arcashima, you want to counter the original so they don't get it back to their hand, but I digress. So, I mean, that pretty much... Storm, I'm sure everybody understands what that is at this point. So, moving forward, we have to try and define what it is as an archetype. So, Joey was helpful with us in that he wrote a damn near novel on our show notes page here. So, I'm going to let him try and discuss or define this, how he sees fit, and then we can comment as we go. So, Joey, what is a Storm archetype?
I think the biggest thing is, like, you're going to be casting multiple things in a turn. That's, like, the classic definition of a Storm deck, obviously. And, like, you don't always have to be utilizing the mechanic of Storm for that to be still a Storm archetype. It obviously it helps with the mechanic to be casting a bunch of stuff, but also I think, like, with Storm decks, generally we think of them as aggressive decks. So at the table, they're usually
not to be confused with aggro. Aggro is a completely different thing.
Right, yeah, but they're going to be setting the pace as far as, like, putting out a lot of resources early so that they can take advantage of them and have one large turn that's going to essentially win them the game through casting a bunch of different spells. That could be a lot of, like, the two main things that you always need if you're really like truly manual storming off is mana and cards. So rituals, artifacts, fast mana, anything that produces extra mana. Even cards like, Wild Cantor Sea Play and stuff like, Corvold and everything. Strike It Rich is a big card that's, seeing a lot of play nowadays. And it's like, you're doing 1-for-1. So a lot of people, you don't always see the value. But in an aggressive Storm deck, that really does just do something, right? Because it builds on what would be a large turn. And and cantrips, like rituals and cantrips, are really two of the things that, like, you're truly, storming off manually. Those are the two things you just need to keep doing over and over again. But I think, like I said, being like the person that sets the pace as far as resources and, like, pushing to win the game early, and, like, kind of make your move early is another thing that I think that goes along with this, because a lot of these decks are Grixis decks, or, like, have a black-red base that are, they're just trying to go right from turn one to turn 2 wins early.
I would say that the big weird thing for Storm in our format in particular is it's not always stopped by your typical stop gaps for Storm decks. There's a lot of stacks pieces that can affect Storm decks in every other meta that have ever tried the Storm mechanic. Sometimes there are creature storms that CDH can do, and it doesn't give a shit about your Deafening Silence, for instance. Yeah.
So one of the biggest distinctions, I think, between the mechanic and the archetype is that the mechanic is more about playing dumb cards that don't matter, that cost little, so that you cantrip draw cards to continue to do that, so that you pad your storm count, so that you have those payoffs like Grape Shot to do the thing. Whereas the archetype doesn't rely on storm cards in some cases at all. Most storm decks, I'd say probably like 80 to 90% of them don't have any cards that say storm, maybe Flusterstorm, but, like, they don't really care about storm per se. It's more the ability to slam down a bunch of mana, cast cantrips to draw you into stuff, and then just keep doing things to...
Yeah, and then eventually hit something like... I mean, like, we're going to talk a lot about Nostorm, but, like, something like that, a mass draw. Like, if you're doing the mass draw up front, then you're going to get all the mana that you need, right? And I think that's why those spells obviously are have been the backbone of CEDH as far as, like, aggressive decks for a long time. But back to what Kirk was saying about stacks pieces, I mean, like, you're obviously super vulnerable to, like, Rule of Law and tax. So, like, those kinds of cards just really shut you down, and that's why, really why those cards exist, is because Ad Nos has been so prevalent for since long before I started playing CDH. So,
I mean, Stacks as an archetype has been around for a long time, even in 1v1 older formats, but it wasn't really something too many people... like, when you were in casual games, you didn't really see it played, because everybody's like, it feels bad, I don't like it. But it's a necessary evil to stop turbo and or fast storm decks, if other decks that aren't on that plan want to try and win, and, you know, that's always going to be a thing. Counterplay's big.
I think the biggest deviation from, like, your regular storm decks that you see in the format is the green storm decks, because, like, they're, like what Kirk was saying with the creature. They're trying to play a bunch of creatures, and
what was the other one too?
That makes them a little bit different as far as
the Flash one. Yeva.
Yeah. I played Yeva for a minute. She wasn't really as much a storm deck as much as like a toolbox deck, but she was stormy at times.
Yeah.
But
I think green probably is definitely leaning more into the creature-based storm, but it still is relying on spells as well, because you're still
need that massive draw. You still need your Life's Legacies and your those big draws. But
so let me ask you this: do you think that it's important for... So there's been a lot of talk about the One Ring and potentially being better than like Adnaz, which I completely disagree with. I don't think that's the case. I can see where it could be kind of close to an Adnaz as far as the amount of life you lose and the amount of cards you draw, but it happens over so many turns that it's like, you're not getting it now. You're not winning turn 3, you're winning turn 7. Like, some decks might like that, but I don't see how that is better than Adnaz. But my point being, do you think that every type... Because we're gonna go into some card examples and list examples here shortly, but do you think that there is a requirement to have that sort of mass draw? So like wheels were a thing, used to be a thing. They were running any colors or any decks that could run them.
They've gone up and down a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like they're not gone, but they're kind of on a downswing right now. So wheels are probably not the best example, but we already brought up Adnaz, and then there's Pier, there's Necropotence, there's other things, and then there's stuff like a weird deck that I've been playing is that the last new version of Narset that essentially uses Traumatize on yourself as an Adnaz per se, because it slams half your deck into your grave, and as long as you get Underworld Breach or a way to tutor Underworld Breach, you can do essentially the same thing you would do in an Adnaz deck, but it's Jeskai. So the final question, do you think that that's the type of thing that's required to make a deck storm, or is that just what those decks do, so to speak?
I don't think it's required, but I think that those decks are definitely like the strongest storm decks in the format for sure. Like, however you build Blue Farm, for the most part, you're still gonna win with Breach and your Thoracle like combos. It's not as much of a storm deck, but it still would be considered because you can win that way by just like, I have an opening here, so I'm gonna slam down a bunch of mana and or be able to ritual off into a Breach and Brainstorm tutor combo. You're just gonna win from that. So a lot of these like top decks like that use and are relying on Adnaz are definitely storm decks, but there are other storm decks that aren't necessarily utilizing those cards specifically. But like Selvala is a huge storm deck, and it runs the mass draw through, like, obviously it has the draw engine on the commander, but it also does Life's Legacy and Momentous Fall and those kinds of cards. So
yeah, and it's a weird thing with our format of CDH too, that storm decks aren't always just storm decks. There's so many decks that can straddle the line between mid-range / storm that it makes it very, very hard to pregame or to meta deck anything. I mean, that's why you don't have the hard and cut, aggro fast stormy decks versus your mid-range versus your stacks decks. There's some kind of blending of all of them. Yeah.
Well, and I guess that was kind of what I was trying to say too, is that like you were saying, you have your Life's Legacy or your Shamanic Revelation or whatever, go wide, go tall, whatever versions that are obviously not as good as an Adnaz, but they are still going to draw you a percentage of those cards. So like that is still kind of your deck's version of that, without having to go infinite with a combo.
Yeah,
well,
I think
a very classic combo. Really quick, I was going to say, like, you've got Thrasios, Dargo, and Greater Good is running all over the place right now. For instance, that's timestamp it for whatever the hell day this is that this comes online, but similar kind of an engine. So
right, 100%. And I think that those decks, like the green decks that we're talking about, and some of the other decks that are like strictly a storm deck, like I think Sylvala and Marwyn really can't. They can't. It's harder for them to win another way other than just like being able to amass. Marwyn might be able to amass like a large board and combat damage. It's harder to do with Sylvala, I think, unless you just have a lot of cards already. So like these decks that kind of can't do anything else, they're mostly just limited by colors. Like the 4-color piles are the most versatile.
I guess we made the point that those mass card draw effects are kind of quintessential to Storm decks because you are slamming out your entire hand to start the game to get advantage,
you need gas.
and then you need something to refill your hand. So that's that answers my question. Now, a follow-up question. Do you think decks that are running like Doomsday...
I think Doomsday is a Storm archetype because you have to crack the pile afterwards, which either you have to use a mechanic on your commander or you have to have a spell like Gush or whatever to crack it open. And
you,
then you
do have to have multiple.
So you have to have and you have to in order to cast Doomsday nowadays with Oppo Agent, you have to have protection or be ready to remove it. It's tough to cast it with somebody having 3 open mana in black.
I mean, there was another card that I was thinking of that I'm not going to remember now, but Doomsday was the main idea of that. Like, it is a 1-card quote unquote win con, but like still takes other steps. I didn't know if we wanted to consider that Storm because, for instance, the only place that I play Doomsday currently is in Yuriko, and that's more of a mid-range tempo-y type of deck that tries to win. Usually just by draining out the table, doing whatever needs to be done, but then sometimes gets the right tutor, gets the right draw, whatever, gets Doomsday, and just does the thing to end the game. I would say that's probably a Storm turn, but it's not really like a Storm build, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah, you're going to have a Storm turn in those. It's not necessarily the archetype of your deck, but you could win with a massive Storm turn, which is how most people win in this game, so...
Right. So I think we all agree that basically the biggest boogeyman in this archetype is any deck that can play Adnaz, Pier, or Necropotence, any of those huge card draw spells that black provides that no other color really provides at the same level. There's obviously a lot of different commanders that can run these kinds of things. You have to be in black, but you can be literally black X and do this because pretty much every color combination... I'd say Orzhov is probably the hardest. Even Orzhov's got stuff now, though. Like, every single color pairing and or 3-color pairing has some version of one of these in their decks because they can capitalize off of it. It just kind of depends on whether or not you want to dedicate your whole game plan to this or if you want to be more mid-range and this is just a value piece. What's your take? Either you guys can answer this. What is your guys' take on Turbo Nas versus the mid-range Nas? Like, where do you guys fall? Which do you prefer?
Me, personally, just speaking for me, I lean more toward the mid-range Nas just because I feel like I hate getting blown out on the all-in Turbo Nas, and I know that doesn't even happen because decks can even rebuild after you get blown out, quote-unquote, from that. But for me, it's just, I prefer the more mid-range value Nas piles, but sometimes that's just because I don't play your conventional commanders that can capitalize as much on a traditional Adnaz build. How about you, Joey?
I think it depends where you're at with your colors. I mean, I think if you're doing something in blue, it's much easier just to justify a mid-range Nas because you can play a little bit more 1-for-1 early with a lot of counter spells and stuff like that, and you can lean back on stuff like Rhystic Study, which is house in the format, obviously. But if I'm playing Rakdos, man, I'm going all in. I'm doing that early Nas. I'm trying to win on turn 1 and turn 2. And just
Mardu as well.
Mardu, yeah, I think Mardu is also, I think, just the most. I have had the most success like with late game Nazes in Mardu, just because like, oh, you get stopped once, it's like, okay, next turn, I'm ready to go again.
Yeah.
I think more times than not that happens in Mardu than any other, color combination.
It is strange though that there are, so the shift in attitude there between the two of you. Obviously, I'm kind of leaning. I lean more towards Joey's direction too. I prefer the all in, but I have had the like I'm running Adnaz and Tivit. I may end up cutting it eventually, but I am running it because it is just one of those things. If you can slam that early game, you just get all the pieces you need to do what you need to do to combo and win, right? So worthwhile. But I have other decks that just run Pier, particularly because of Hoarding Broodlord, which we've talked about already a few times, but like just that combo of being able to play that, play the Saw in half, get the... Fuck, I can't even remember the combo right now. I'm
Sacrifice, Saw in half, Broodlord, Burn Offering if you're in Black-Red, yeah.
Yeah.
And
then get your Pier and just cast it for next to nothing, and usually you probably still have mana, so you have protection on top of it. If you're in... like say Grixis, you probably have protection. Otherwise, if you're in like Mardu and you're doing that kind of thing, you're just Silence or any of the other.
Yeah, you have Grand Abolisher,
etc.
Ranger Captain.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing to consider with that is like, if you're commanders are your backup plan, then you can just go all in on, like, you can mulligan for your most aggressive thing that you can do, and then you can say, oh, I'm going to play Tymna if all this falls through, and I'm still going to be able to draw a couple cards, and I'll be able to recover at least somewhat from that, right, by turn 3. So if you have a commander that's not part of your main plan, like, Blue Farm obviously is the picture boy for this format, so like, it's easy to relate to that.
Blue Farm, Grixis as well. There's so many Grixis commanders that can do the thing and do it well. Kess, Inala, even though Inala doesn't really do those kinds of lines, it's still possible to. I mean, I play Evelyn, which still runs Nas, even though that's not the main game plan. Lots of Grixis, lots of Mardu, lots of Rakdos. When you get into any other colors where it's like black-green or black-white, then you're having to do completely different things. But it can still be Storm. You can do, the Bomberman combo into this or that. And then if you're in Golgari, you can do, like, the Chain and Smog combo, and that's still kind of a Stormy finish. So there's those kinds of... I think the only place that doesn't really exist is, like, Gruul. And it still exists, it's just way more hoops you gotta jump through to get to those. You don't really have 2-card combos, it's like 3 or 4-card combos, really. But
I think Joey really kind of nailed it. Like that's how and earlier when you said it, and I think it was Joey that said it, that a lot of times that's how you win in our format. The turn that you win, you're kind of doing a Stormy type of turn. You're playing a lot of extra spells, kind of going off, so to speak.
And we can't call that an archetype though, because that's every deck can do that to some degree.
I mean, outside of like Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, 2-card game over kind of stuff, a lot of times you're looping it with your Brain Freeze and Breach or whatever else. Yeah. I do find it interesting.
Storm card that we didn't mention. Brain Freeze.
Yeah, I do find it interesting. The main boogeyman of the mono black world, which is Crick or Kirk or whatever the fuck you want to pronounce it, doesn't play Adnaz. It plays Peer into the Abyss only.
Right. I think that's actually because of the
it preserves life total too.
Yeah. Well.
Because losing half your life as opposed to however much you could to an Adnaz, and then drawing half your deck is just simply better for that list.
Well, because you're already spending your life, I guess is probably the main thing. And
you also have a whole lot of big old fat drops in the deck. But it's just funny that like the one of the fastest decks in the format, also mono black, doesn't play Adnaz, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think that's like a big crux with Adnaz is like, is this your main game plan and your commander is your backup plan, or is like your commander the main game plan? Like if you're playing Frog, get Rog, and you just have Adnaz in the list because it's good.
Yeah, it's Tivit. Like it's not Adnaz is not your thing. It's just there. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I prefer to play a deck like I threw together my Rakdos Flame War Transformer deck, and that is like, oh, I want to find my Adnaz first in my mulligans. If I don't do that, then I have a cheap commander that can draw me cards.
Yeah, and I think that's the theory for all Mardu lists as well, because they're running Tymna and either Roger or Jessica or Dargo even, I guess, but generally speaking, it's the two of those. And that's their game plan, is like, yeah, we're gonna try and do this thing fast, and if we can't, turn one or two Tymna, go draw some cards. Find the solution. And you're running such a density of tuners, you can always find the solution.
That's why I love Jessica so much too. I run Mardu, Timna, Jessica, and
I love that list just
plan
as
of being
much
able
as
to just be
Roger.
like, you know,
they're just like kind of the same thing on two different axes.
yeah, just the backup plan of being able to like, oh, I'm just gonna play Jessica and destroy your dorks or your, you know, tutu that's holding me back. It's a stacks piece or whatever it is. It's so yeah, it's all about like I think playing with your color combination and your commander in mind is how you should approach that.
Yeah, I don't think you jam any of these into every list that's on black. I think you jam them into every list that's on black that can either make it a main game plan or somehow support it with commanders or the overall other game plan. Because most decks have, you know, game plan A and game plan B, and then like C and or D are like win with combat damage because just everything went horribly wrong, or it's this fucking stacksy game, or whatever the case is, and people just drained each other or whatever. If you have made the distinction that you do want to play ad nauseam, regardless of if you play it for value or as the main game plan, what's your preference? Do you prefer instant speed ad nauseam on somebody else's end step, or do you prefer a main phase ad nauseam?
I prefer to cast it whenever I think it's going to resolve. Whenever I think it has the highest chance of resolving.
He's a fence sitter. He's a fence sitter.
So you have to read your game, you know, like you're looking at somebody across the table from you who played out, you know, is tapped out, and you think that next turn they're going to hold up mana. You should cast it on your main phase before they draw a card, before they untap. If you think that you can wait until right before your turn, obviously that's the most ideal time to cast it. I just think you're looking for a window where it will resolve.
I agree with all that wholeheartedly. However, I will say I am definitely of a difference of opinion of what Lane's going to say. I believe I'm an end step ad nauseam whenever possible kind of guy, and I'll tell you my reasons for it beyond the obvious of untapping with a handful of shitloads of cards. Your opponents don't have the ability to play a free fucking force of negation on their turn. So if I can jam it on the blue player's turn, I can shut off that piece of removal. Also, if I'm not having to ritual a whole bunch of shit into it, I can probably avoid their mind break trap as well. So that is why I am an end step ad nauseam and not a my turn Chad Nas player. Islane, take it away. I'd love to hear your opinion because I know it's different.
Chad Nas, hell yeah. I have literally cast it at instant speed 0 times. I understand the reasoning. I understand, but I tend to be the player that gets my Grand Abolisher out 2 turns before I can even cast ad nauseam, and fingers crossed it stays. And if it does stay, then I just go ham on my turn, and I don't give a fuck. Otherwise, you know, it's a Ranger Captain. Otherwise, I'm holding on to a Silence, and that's when I jam it. That's in white. If I'm playing Grixis and you don't have that option, I usually try to make sure I at least have Counterspell backup. But I want to do it now, and I want to get all my value out of it now. That doesn't mean I don't whiff. It doesn't mean I haven't killed myself, but, you know, it is what it is.
I probably had the most ad nauseam countered of anybody that I've played with. I don't seem to get them countered. Run it in, and my preference on that, and it's because I play like aggressive decks almost exclusively. I have only a couple decks that are
it's
like,
player, not deck. People are just playing.
Yeah, I throw it down and make them have it, and you know if they have it, then they have it on me, and I hope that I built my deck. I hope I built my deck good enough to come back to it, or I'm using somebody else's deck that's good enough to come back from it. Like I said, I've had a lot of success with you know, Tim Najeska, Mardu. Just it bounces right back.
Yeah, you know? I've had the most success.
You try again next
too.
turn with protection. It's not, you know.
And part of that also leads to me, and like I said earlier when we talked about the strategy of it, is it's usually a backup strategy for me, not always the main strategy. So then a lot of times if I'm end stepping it, if they're countering it on the end step, using up resources on their end step, I'm untapping, taking my turn, hopefully less interaction removal of my opponents than my other game plan can come into play. So that's part of the theory and my style as well.
Yeah, I get it. I think it's just I'm going to run my head into this wall, and either the wall's going to break or it's going to break me. And that's just what I do. That's what I see Joey do more often than not. He might want to tell you he's a fence sitter, but he's not. He fucking smashed.
So no, I've cast plenty of end step Nazes, but more often than not, if I hold it up, I end up casting it before the end step, right before my turn, because I get nervous about somebody else untapping, or somebody drawing a card, or if there's like I'm casting a Heuristic Study, I'm like, oh shit, I'm throwing.
I have
down.
seen. I don't know if it was you, but I have seen people do it like in response to somebody else's game-winning thing. Like, okay, fuck it, let's see if we can find an answer. It's the same reason you would drop a Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact, and you're just like.
But you get to keep all the cards, so it's
that is better, that is beneficial. But you know, if you don't get the answer, you're probably losing anyway. So it is kind of a Hail Mary, but sometimes those.
I'm the guy that probably lets that Heuristic Study pass priority on me and just see if anybody else wants to fight over that before I slam off my ad nos. Maybe I'm wrong. That's just probably me.
I mean, generally speaking, you shouldn't be slamming down anything into somebody's Heuristic unless you could. If your Storm Heuristic is your worst enemy, remove that shit first. You're gonna fuck yourself.
I think going forward against Heuristic Study is like that's a conversation. I think as well. Like you're
that's fucking.
You know, when do you decide? Okay, it's worth it to this is the only time I'm gonna get this window. Like this Heuristic Study isn't going anywhere. So this is the only time I'm gonna get this window. And yeah, I'm gonna let him draw 3 or 4 cards, but I might have a chance to win the game if he doesn't hit a counterspell.
I think then that's what I'm on is Lane's plan of I hope I'm in Esper at least, so I have a Grand Abolisher or Silence or something, or Ranger Captain I can pop first. So
Esper or Mardu, always the way to go.
Defense Grid, guys. That's
I mean, that
if you don't have white, use Defense Grid.
I got blown out the other day playing against somebody with a Defense Grid because they left up 3 fucking mana and they had their Fierce Guardianship. God damn. Anyway.
God.
Also, notably,
that has happened to me. So
if you're notably also if you're in white, you can have that Boromir protection as well.
Damn right, buddy.
Which I slept on. Kirk showed me the light. I've added it to quite a few decks. It's pretty good. I ended up. So I played in a weird sidebar, but I played in a CPDH tournament the other day, and the night before I dug through my cards, got everything together. Then the day of, I was like, okay, I got up like a couple hours because it started kind of early. And it was my day off, so I was like, I'll get up a couple hours before. I'll print off the last proxies I need, get that all set up, and be ready. Printer decided to jam, like, multiple times. It was fucking weird. And then it also ran out of ink, basically. Like, so some of them were so illegible, and I had to play on webcam. It was bad. So I got new ink, and I just updated Sithis. I'm working on some of my other decks, but they've had cards in considering for like this entire year that I haven't actually put on them. So I'm like, it's time to start updating my paper decks because there's so much shit that has come out. It was only like 6 cards, but still like needed to happen. So we're looking good to continue to do that because as we talk about this stuff, I'm reminded of other cards. I'm like, oh fuck, I need to put Boromir in my fucking Tymna list. Why don't I have that yet? Anyways.
He beats draws cards pretty well with Tymna too, for sure.
So let's touch on deck building a bit. What do you think, like, if you had to pick, like, what's like a good average CMC for a deck? We're going to have to use Adnods again in this example because Pier doesn't really care as much about it. Yeah. Neither does Necropotence, but
Bolas' Citadel does also care about it, so I think it's...
Yeah, that's another one we didn't touch on at all. That is a Stormy type list, if you can get all the cards that go along with it to make it happen. Anyhow, main point being is, do we think, or like, what kind of average CMC do you think you should be at for a Storm deck or an Adnons deck? What should the total mana value be? Like, what's the cutoff for your CMCs? Like, do you exclusively run 4 or less, 3 or less? Like, only have an exception for, 1 6-drop because it's amazing? Because, if you're in Grixis and you're in Adnos, like, you still want to run your Force of Will. But that is a hard hit. So, like, you have to have discussions with yourself or others about each one of these things. So, overall, CMC, what sorts of cards are you cutting because you don't want to hit them with Adnos? Like, discuss. You guys take it away.
So one of the considerations, I don't have a hard and fast number. I mean, like 130 total CMC of the deck, maybe kind of the number I'm I'm shooting for to keep it that or under.
So the whole average thing that was probably bad. Mostly the average. The total I don't even know off the top of my head.
That would be 1.3.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Good math in there, math.
100 cards, yeah.
Fucking math teachers over here. God damn.
Jesus. But for me, it's a lot of consideration too about what kind of cards I'm going to run. So a good example is Dam. If I'm playing Esper, am I looking at Dam or am I looking at Toxic Deluge? Because not only is Dam 2 mana versus 3 mana, but then am I going to have the life to actually fire off a Toxic and then still go deep on an Adnaz? So a lot of it's like individual little card choices like that. The new hot tech that everybody's trying, Lorien revealed, the little one colorless blue card that cycles for an island. That also like is a 5-drop that draws 3. I mean, you're probably not playing that if you're playing Adnaz in your deck, I wouldn't think.
Mm-mm.
So it's a lot of more individual card choices for me than it is
Same thing
overall.
with like Treasure Cruise, like you can't really play that. As much as you want it, you can't play it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that's really my distinction is I'll look a lot of times individual cards. I don't have a hard fast number, but yeah, like 1.3 or less is probably, if I'm trying to go hard on Adnaz, that's probably where I'm looking.
Yeah.
I'll still run it anything under 1.5. I'll also run. I don't mind running Citadel and Villas, or Citadel and Razaketh, or Citadel and Hoarding Broodlord,
or like even Adnaz and Pier. Like that happens.
Well, yeah. I'm always running Pier. I think. Like I think Pier is your late game Naz, right? Like if you run out, like people are attacking you. That's how people really try to hurt you in the early game before you've gone off. You always have to have a Pier backup, but I think like I'm still gonna run in a lot of decks. I would still run Citadel and Villas, or Citadel and one other fatty, one of those big creatures. Like Gitrog still runs 2 Titans. I mean that's they're and Adnaz is not like the main game plan, but you can still certainly win with an Adnaz. So I think like I know that's like always that's the exception to the rule. But I think, anything 1.5 or under, you're doing just fine. I mean, I have decks that are 1.6, 1.7. I think I still have it in there. And I also have a deck that has 50 total mana value or less. And, obviously it runs on Naz. It's the whole thing. But
that is a cool deck, too. Another thing that is considered Storm that's you're going to kind of potentially be a deck that's on Adnaz, but that's going to have some high CMC stuff in it, is anything that's doing Worldgorger Dragon loops. Worldgorger Dragon's, what, 6 or 7 CMC?
6. Is it 6 or 7?
6.
No, goddammit, now I have to look.
3 red and 3, I think.
Oh, okay, so yeah, it is 6. I know it's a 7/7, though.
It's still the kind of thing that you can hit off your Adnaz and then be like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah.
But, it also sucks that it's in your hand, yada yada.
Well,
but
at least you can discard it then.
But then also another argument, and I know it's a card you're a fan of, I'm a fan of, is like cards like Final Parting, where it's a 5 CMC tutor, which is like ouch, and also ouch to your Adnaz, but it puts the dragon in the bin and puts the animate dead in your hand, so you just got your win con right there. It's telegraphed, because everybody knows that's what you're going to do with it. But,
yeah, but I treat that as like a 7 mana win the game type thing, right? Like
honestly, yes, but that doesn't mean it. My point is that like you're now raising your average cost, you're raising the overall cost of the deck, etc. So there are some decks that are still going to run big shit. But like you said, you might be running Razaketh, you might be running Bolas Citadel. There's a lot of considerations to be made for all of those different cards, and having 1 or 2 cards that are big CMC doesn't really affect your average all that much, and it's pretty unlikely that you hit them. But there are those games where you're like,
yeah,
Force of Will.
I mean, it's gonna happen.
This thing, fuck. You see like 10 cards and you're like, I'm almost dead. I have to stop.
Got all the biggies already. Although you got to admit, it is nice when you have those big fatties in your deck and you're gonna flip them. It's so much better when you flip them early. Then at least they're there. You're not like, oh shit, I can't flip because I'm at 5 life and I still have Force of Will in the deck. It's so much nicer if you just get it out of the way early.
If it's gonna burn, I need 1 more mana to win. Yeah. It's like, yeah, like you really want to flip that next card, but it's like really close. Yeah, that's
right. Although total segue here. God damn it! Why don't people play Abdel Adrian a lot more? Worldgorger still is a thing, but Abdel is just so much safer and so much better. Anyway,
if you're in the right colors, it's great, but it's not. It's not that it's worse. Yeah, I mean, my Mardu deck doesn't run anything like that. So arguably I run the best Worldgorger deck, period, because Evelyn doesn't need another creature anywhere to do the loop, so she doesn't need that security of being able to close it. She doesn't have to worry about anybody exiling all graveyards. She doesn't have to worry about Rest in Peace, none of that shit. because everything goes to exile with her every time she comes back. You also have dumb shit like Mount Doom that you just fucking ding everybody every single loop and just kill everyone without even needing anything else. So, in that case, yeah. But, Joey's played it in a multitude of fashions. What used to be, I want to say, probably one of his favorite ways to win the game. And I saw him get blown out. I've personally blown him out a fuck ton of times. But
I think the last time that I played the card, I got blown out. But yeah, I mean...
it happens, but that is the all-in high risk.
I mean, when you can do it on turn 1, turn 2, it's pretty great. But yeah, that is the trade-off. Is if you do it turn 4, you're definitely gonna die.
But that's also why I ended up including stuff like Displacer Kitten and other things in my deck, because Evelyn herself is like a Paco.
I think the biggest thing with Abdel is that you need an extra color, and you also need a board state that you don't necessarily need with World Gorger Dragon, right? Like all you need with World Gorger Dragon is mana on board to produce enough colors.
Yeah,
but you also need a way to break the loop unless you have Mount Doom or something where you can actually use the
Sunscorched Desert,
which is why I say Evelyn is the best version. of the deck.
I currently run Croxa, and you don't need it with that obviously because her ETB just kills the table. But
I think as far as efficiency goes and not needing the extra stuff, it is the safest version of World Gorger.
Closing the loop is the hardest part, for sure.
Yeah. Abdel, very good. It's pretty dominant in CPDH because it does exactly what it does. It flickers. They don't care, but they play out value creatures and value artifacts and value anything, and they just bounce everything behind an Abdel and then put out fucking 10 creatures. It is kind of the Storm deck of that format. It's close to Storm as you can be. Because it does have, Peregrine. The white-blue version can still run Peregrine Drake and stuff, so you can just do infinite mana loops and then continue to flicker over and over, drawing cards each time. It is kind of the closest thing to like what an Adnaz would do, but with only commons. It's crazy. It's crazy that that's even possible. But, yeah. In CEDH, I think it's fine. I don't know that either one is better or worse than the other, but I do think that they're probably both kind of bad. I mean, most people don't play World Gorger because it's kind of bad, because it kind of is too easy to stop and blah, blah, blah. But it is one of those fun, high-risk, high-reward kind of things, and sometimes you fucking jam it and you win, and sometimes you jam it and you lose. Sometimes you jam it and you manage to stabilize again and try to do something else.
Oh. The crazy thing about it is that usually you only need 2 mana. So like if you get blown out and you lose your whole board, if you get 2 lands and a Dance of the Dead, then you're right back in it.
Try it again.
But that's what the piece that cracks me up about it is, like, the Abdel line is 0 risk, same rewards. Like you said, there is a little different setups for it.
You need to have Arcane Signet out or whatever, right? Like that's the
not necessarily. I mean, you can if you're creating infinite 1/1 soldiers, that's not the worst thing without anything else. So.
Yeah.
Problem is they don't have haste. So yeah, if you pass turn and then somebody else has got it, you just did all that and then you lose. So it is the same high risk, high reward kind of scenario.
Yeah,
I'm not advocating for just making a bunch of infinite soldiers and passing. That is definitely not the idea, but it is a thing you can do still.
In your World Gorger Dragon lists, previously you used to run a lot of like these little tiny creatures that you just sacrifice them for whatever, like they're little blood pets. Like you have that guy, and then the goblin one, Skirk Prospector.
Yeah.
And then you have the Insolent Neonate that like lets you discard a card as well.
I play that still. There's a lot of these Falcon cards, Wrath, something that does the same thing. Like there's quite a few.
Yeah,
of those
so like
cards.
usually in your World Gorger decks you build it around being able to close the loop, hopefully. Like, and Croxa, obviously you cast Croxa early to make everyone discard, and you just leave her in the yard.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that is easy. That's an easier thing to plan for in deck building. Whereas like every deck has an Arcane Signet and a Mana Crypt and stuff, but like having it out is different than having it in your deck.
I would argue that more often than not, rituals aren't played as much if you aren't going turbo. Because I've had plenty of decks that are in black and or red that don't run any rituals because it's just not really necessary. Or if they are running something, it's like a Rite of Flame or it's a dark ritual because it's 1 mana to get extra mana. Like those two in particular are very, very good. But like when you start getting into the pyretic rituals or the ones where you have to sack, well, Culling the Weak is still really good too. But you know what I'm saying? Like some of those don't get run in decks that aren't trying to go turbo. If they're more mid range, they're like, I don't really need this. I'd rather run a mana vault or something else.
What's crazy about Rite of Flame is how much better it is if everybody's running it, right? So like if everybody at your table has a Rite of Flame, you have a chance of getting 3 mana off that Rite of Flame.
Sure.
And I think that's like something that, like is so it rarely ever happens, but like people, I think that like when I've called that out to people, they've been like, wait, what? Like they don't even realize it says in all graveyards.
I didn't realize that either, but I've never seen that happen where I've gotten extra mana from it. But that's something.
I've never gotten extra mana from it myself, but I've seen other people get it because I cast it previously and they got an extra mana.
Islane, you've probably been scummed out of free red mana and you didn't even know about it.
Probably.
We were holding out that red mana on you, buddy.
That's right.
We should talk about mulligans.
Yeah. Well, what do you got to say about it?
Well, I mean, like it is like your whole game pretty much, right? Like you're especially early. If you're not playing Tymna, especially, it's like.
I think if you're not playing Tymna or you're not playing in blue or you have the Ristics or the Mystics or whatever to get you back in it. Well, basically white or blue because there's Esper and other stuff now, Archivist and whatnot. I think those two colors are kind of the best at drawing cards right now as far as like depending on, because I mean you got Ledger Shredder and Fairy Mastermind too, so like depending on other people doing stuff to draw you cards, white and blue is where it's at. Everything else, it requires its own thing to do it, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. Like black has its, pay 2 life, draw 2 cards kind of thing, and there's a billion versions of that. And then red has anything where you can draw and discard. Sometimes it's more than 1 card, sometimes it's not. And then blue has got like, look at the top X cards, get 1, put 1 in your graveyard, put 1 on the bottom of your library, put 1 up your butthole. So when it comes to just just incidental card draw off of what other people are already trying to do is going to be your strongest point, and in that case, white and blue are the best. And so you're either going to want to be on Esper. Well, that's why Blue Farm is good because it can run all of that. But Esper or Grixis are probably your best bets as far as having reliable card draw all the time.
And the whole discussion really is our format is about mulligan choices. If you don't make strong mulligan choices, you're screwed. Period. It can definitely be a lot more dependent on the deck list. If you're, like you said before, if your commanders can recover your hand, then you can certainly mulligan way more aggressively. If you're counting on drawing on your commander, or if you're playing a turn 1 Najeela and you're trying to get there with little 1/1 soldiers, and that's your only game plan, you're probably not getting there. Who knows? But they play Adnaz now too. So yeah, I think mulliganing is like the biggest skill in our entire format, truthfully, and it certainly holds true with Adnaz pilots. If your deck plan is Adnaz and you're not mulliganing aggressively to be able to see it by turn 2, turn 3, and cast it, you're screwed.
No, and sometimes you can't get there. Sometimes you mulligan to 5, and you're like, well, going to 4.
I mean, I consistently mulligan to 4 if I have shit hands. That's not even a question for me.
Yeah, you got to do it. I think, and that's the only reason that people really play wheels nowadays is that they want to be able to go deep on their mulligan. At least me, like that's the main reason why I feel like they're worth a slot in your deck. If you're planning to mulligan aggressively,
I think
you can
turbo lists are
mana and
place.
if you can get a like 2 lands, a dark ritual on a wheel, like you're good. You're gonna be able to fire that off on turn 2 and reload your hand and figure out something else later. So.
Me and Kirk have been kind of vocal about not liking wheels anymore because it just so often it feels like you wheel somebody else into the win or whatever. But arguably,
big risk. But like, that's why you want them though.
Right.
I think
also turn
why
1
they're good
is good. Like a turn 1 wheel, you're going first.
Absolutely.
You shit your hand out and then you wheel. Fucks everyone else for the next foreseeable few turns.
I'm gonna stick my foot in my mouth here probably and piss people off, but I think turn 1 wheels, unless your game plan is early Adnaz and that's what you've mulliganed down to, I think turn 1 wheels are dog shit, just as bad as turn 7 fucking wheels. Discarding my hand and drawing 7 new fresh cards is fine because my graveyard is another resource. I've probably mulliganed to 5. Somebody else has probably mulliganed to 6 in the pod. You're just refilling everybody. I think turn 1 wheels are just as big a trap as a turn 1 Sarah Ascendant, expecting it to get there. I think they're dog shit, but in the case of like a Rograk and Tymna, where you're just refilling because you mulliganed aggressively, they're fucking amazing. And it has nothing to do with anything other than just trying to dig for your win attempt.
I think that's the point, is that's why it's there. But even still, I'll fight you. Turn 1 Sarah Ascendant in Tymna is fucking amazing, and you can't tell me otherwise. I won't
play it in the deck. Won't play Sarah Ascendant in the Tymna list. That's me.
I play it because that thing has fucking gotten me to like 60 life, and I drew a bunch of cards.
And you still lost. What do you want to bet?
Maybe not.
That's my point. It's a trap. It's a fucking trap.
I don't know. I think wheels are more of a trap than Sarah's Ascendant, but
I think they're on par for me.
Yeah, I think like you're playing wheels to win the turn. You like if you're not winning after you cast the wheel, if you have no resources after that, then hopefully you're the one that gained the most cards from it, right? Like that's the only scenario when it's good, because otherwise you're just giving.
And my example of turn 1 is that they had mulligan to whatever and thought
or you
it was
just
a good
shit
hand.
out 5 rocks and like you got your Mana Crypt, your Soul Ring, and your your
and you had a wheel and then you just go.
Yeah, then your way ahead, absolutely fine.
And also, I wasn't using turn 1 wheel as an example, like for like land. Fucking 2 rocks and then just cast it and like whatever. Like it's not willy nilly. It's more.
But I see so many fucking people do that, and I
know, and I think that's stupid.
What the fuck are you doing?
I think that it is better when you actually have that thing in mind, where you're like, okay, I can do this. I can fucking potentially like see more and maybe fuck people over because their first hand. If you're turn 1, seat 1, and you do 3 or 4 things, and then you have no hand, and you wheel. Like, they get to see 7 more cards, sure, but maybe they don't even have a land now. So at that point, you fucked them hard, and you're way
You're going to get rid of, like, at least a Mana Crypt. Like, you're going to get rid of, like, their hand-picked hands, obviously, and which is, like, it feels good, but it doesn't always lead to a win. And especially if you're not in seat 1, if you're in seat 2 or 3, then it's an absolutely trash way to start the game, because you're just going to, like, basically take out one person, or, and then just refuel the 2 other people who just put out like a Mystic Remora and a...
Right, and that's the other thing too, like the argument for like you remove one player, sometimes you removing a player early just fucks your game plan because you needed that player to have interaction to stop your other opponents, that's
right. I'm not a big fan of doing that either, but I think that there are times where you're like, okay, this is a type of deck that I can't really let get rolling. But at the same time, I don't generally think it's a good move to just be like, I'm gonna make sure that I can take out this player because I have the opportunity to.
So
real quick, I'm not gonna let Joey sit the fence on this one. What's your weigh in on Sarah Ascendant?
I love Sarah Ascendant, and Tymna especially. Anywhere else, it's really not that good, but in Tymna, it's good.
Dog shit.
It's so good.
Dog shit.
If you're playing Adnaz 6 life a turn, like you're basically like you're stopping people from attacking your main resource that you're trying to use to win the game.
It's like Ikra. Like that's the reason really people used to run Ikra is because it would make their Adnazes fucking huge.
So it's basically you drop it on turn 1, you play Tymna turn 2. That's a good opening hand in my opinion because you're immediately drawing.
It's not your strongest hand because it's not like a turn 2 Adnaz.
No, it's not great,
but it's a good alternative, I think.
It's fine, yeah. It's
fine. We'll go with fine, but it's not good. I'd rather play. I recently heard somebody bitching about this on a podcast, and I'd rather play a turn 1 Wing Crafter, turn 2 Tymna, so I can get in with 2 creatures.
Oh, that was play to win. I heard that one. Yeah,
I literally would,
because they were talking about where this card would go, and I was like, it goes in Yuriko, and then Dylan was like Thrasios something, and Cam's like, what? Why would you play that there? Like, that's awful. And then they got to the end of it, and he was like, oh, yeah, okay. So it makes sense playing it in Yuriko, but anyways. So, regardless of if we're playing Mardu or Grixis or whatever the case may be, Blue Farm, getting away from the big cantrip, draw a bunch of cards, and try to win the game on the spot, there's another big win line. I mean, outside of, like, Thassa's and Consultation. We all know that one. Everybody knows that one. That's not Storm. That's just a two-card win con. The other big one, especially if you are in some of those color pairings that I just mentioned, is Underworld Breach. I actually just recently... I'm curious what you guys think about this. I recently saw on Twitter somebody was saying that Underworld Breach isn't good anymore. That it's just like because of XYZ thing. I don't remember their exact arguments, but it was just like, it can be interacted with. Your graveyard can get interacted with. It takes too many steps to do.
Dies for removal. Is that that's their fucking argument?
I guess it was kind of more like there's a lot of points where you could interact with it. But yeah, what do you guys think about that?
It sounds like recency bias to me. Somebody that only listens to articles, doesn't play the fucking game, and now they're all like, the One Ring is the greatest thing of all time. No more Underworld Breach. No, I mean, the One Ring's fine, but Underworld Breach still fine.
The reason it's so good is it can be reasonably interacted with. That it was never the most resilient win con. The reason it's so good is because it's amazing by itself without winning the game.
Yep.
Right?
It's simply a 2-mana recursive spell. Period.
It does a whole thing without winning the game, a very effective thing that can really pull you ahead in some situations. So I just don't think that the versatility of it is unmatched in terms of win cons. Like that is as far as card quality, it's a win con and like a top tier card quality card that is going to do work for you.
It's 2 mana, do whatever the fuck you want to do with it. And it's 2 mana. It's not even 5 or 8 or fucking 12. It's fucking 2 mana, and it either gets you one thing back that helps you, or it fucking wins the game.
People thought Yawgmoth's Will was busted, but like you can't cast the same spell over and over again with Yawgmoth's Will.
Yawgmoth's was busted, I mean, like, but Breach is just leagues ahead.
Yeah, it's like you could go on for days about Breach, not only about like the card itself being so good, but the way that it changed the entire meta. Like I was just kind of starting CEDH when it like got big, because although like it turned a lot of heads initially, like as far as what I know, it didn't really like take over the meta for like several months.
No, yeah, it took a minute for people to figure out how to use it.
Once it did, it changed the scope of like how people deck build, because they like Graveyard Hate almost entirely went away unless you were in a hard stacks list. So like
that came
most
back
of the time,
for sure.
Graveyards are just free reign, pretty much. Like that's how kind of we think of it. Everybody thinks of it as just it's just another resource. It's another place to get cards from.
But it did actually bring back some of the hate. Because especially with
none of it
Dothi
stuck around, because Dothy's a big one, but like none of it has really stuck around. Like people don't play Rest in Peace. They tried to bring it back on Breach, but like too many white decks also are in red. Like I don't know, it doesn't. It crosses over.
It does
a lot of the time.
It's hard to play Rest in Peace when you're trying to also play Savine's Reclamation. Exactly.
Right.
So.
Yeah. There's all these things that like pull you toward the graveyard, and they kind of like Dothy is an anomaly because it's such a strong card by itself.
Yeah.
So that's like it's a good card for the like obviously this.
What are you talking about? Dothy's trash. It dies to removal, just like the Underworld Breach. It must be bad, right?
But yeah, I mean, like the way that Breach changed the landscape of graveyards in general is just like insane.
Just the whole escape mechanic did it. It was Uro and Kroxa and then Breach were like the 3 big ones that set, where it was like, holy fuck.
Uro was huge for a minute.
It was, and then it disappeared. But it was really bad in Standard and other places where it could be played. Kroxa obviously made its home in CDH. And then
right
Breach. It took a minute for people to figure it out, but as soon as they did, brain freeze is the obvious culprit. Is that you can mill yourself to then have enough fodder to sacrifice to recast the brain freeze enough times to mill everyone out, and then they just
grinding
die.
station.
Grinding station works too. There's a few other ways you can do it as well, but yeah, it's it can also just get you a tutor that you can cast twice to get your Thassa's and your consult or whatever your other 2-card win con is.
You already tried to win with that tutor, and then like, okay, so you cast Breach, you cast the tutor again, and you're going to try to win again, either this turn or the next turn.
Dumped enough resources, you can recast your Adnos. Who knows? I mean, there was a huge argument for a minute of, is Breach or is Thoracle the best win con in the format? I think that argument still exists. I don't think it's changed.
I think they're pretty fairly matched as far as like either one can do the thing. I'd say it's probably Breach, Thoracle, and like Nas are like the big 3. Yeah,
but Nas wins on what? Breach and Thoracle most of the time.
Sure, you're correct. You're correct. Adnos doesn't always win with either of those, though. Sometimes it wins with something else because you're in black-green. It wins with Chain of Smog. It still is going to get you to where you want it to be. Either way, Breach will do the same thing. It's also gotten to the point where there's like I was talking about the Narset earlier, where you can use Traumatize on yourself, mill half your library, and then use Breach to then win by other means. So it sets up a lot of stuff, and it really depends on your commander and your game plan, etc. A lot of times, if you're in Grixis, you're running the Thoracle, you're running the Adnaz, you're also running the Breach lines. If you're in Mardu, you can be running Breach lines to do like Bomberman stuff, or, you know, whatever other thing. And then if you're in fucking Jund, you can be doing Korvold and then, you know, doing Dockside loops, etc.
I remember when Breach was spoiled, the top comment on the Reddit thread was, "We found a way to we finally found a way to break Lion's Eye Diamond." So like that interaction kind of always was around. I don't think people were like anywhere near Brain Freeze though.
Yeah, I think that took a little bit to get to the point where it was being put, at least in circles I ran in, or places that I followed and read about.
I mean, we were playing in r/CDH, or maybe that was still in the play DH days.
When we got really involved, it was kind of at the tail end of the Flash meta, and I didn't really play much against Flash Hulk, which is a whole nother Storm archetype, but we haven't even touched on a lot of them. But you know, hopefully, regardless of this whole conversation about Storm and all the different possibilities, is informative and helpful for those that and put comments down below if you want us to, you know, help you out. Yeah,
tell them they're wrong about Sarah's Ascendant, or tell me I'm wrong, whatever.
Please do. That might be the question of the fucking podcast.
Dog shit, it's a trap.
Sarah's Ascendant is good. Don't fucking shit on her. But yeah, like there's a lot of different things that make a Storm deck, and there's a lot of different I mean, we've got like 30,000 fucking cards out there. At the rate that Wizards is printing, we're gonna have 50,000 cards by like next year. So, you know, there's a lot of different individual cards and decks we could talk about, but we've mostly been on black, so I want to kind of pivot a little bit because we are getting a little long in the tooth. Let's talk about non-black Storm. Let's do this. We'll do monocolor, then we'll do dual, triple, quad, 5, and then just give an example and kind of what it's trying to do and how it may differ in a way that it differs from what a black list would be doing. I guess we can't even really get into 4 or 5 color because they're generally still winning with those same win cons. So we've basically covered that. So it's basically 1, 2, and 3 colors. And that's about it. So
I'll start us off with the first one in mono red because I know Joey's going to want to take the second one in mono red. Bergie mono red is basically red mana cantrip Storm. You're just every spell you cast is a cantrip that produces a red mana, replaces itself until you draw into either an Underworld Breach type loop, I assume. I don't play the deck. By Squeeze Knees that I play against a lot does. Or you play like a Grape Shot actual Storm, or you do Grinning Ignis manual Storm, Creature Storm, into Infinite Storm, Grape Shot type shit. But anyway, that's mono red. That's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I guess you could call... I don't know if I want to call it Storm, but Godo is kind of a Stormy list in the sense that, like, it either drops the Treasonous Ogre and does the whole thing for life, or it does a bunch of ramping to get to the mana cost to do the thing to win. And then it is infinite combat, so it is not... It's like an Agila 2, where it's infinite combat. So it's like, you are taking that same action over and over again, which to me feels Stormy. Even
you can call it Combat Storm, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's Aggravated Assault Storm. But, Joey, tell us about your favorite deck.
Oh yeah,
one of your favorite decks.
So the reason Red's so good is because you get that impulse draw and those rituals. Like, you know, Jessica's Will is like the epitome of a Storm card, right? Like, you're gonna flip some cards, you're gonna make a shitload of mana. That's like what you want. Mm-hmm. I play a lot of Cerkera, which is like probably my favorite like pure manual Storm deck, because it operates a little bit differently. Mostly, it's like just using her as an engine to just flip cards off the top, rather than. But
notably, having to do damage to flip those cards.
Right, yeah. Her mechanic is pretty unique. Every time you do a damage using a spell, you just flip a card from the top and you're able to cast that turn. So it's very impulsive, very, you know, fun. You just want to, ritual off and keep hitting people for damage,
but very non-deterministic as well.
Right, yeah, and it operates all on impulse draw on an engine rather than that one big spell that's going to draw you 40 cards, like Peer into the Abyss or something like that, which makes it a little bit more like, is this going to happen this turn, or rather than...
It's kind of like Elsha and Joyra and some of the other ones that do it in a different way, but very similarly, like they're consistently playing a bunch of cards and they don't know if they're going to win. We got to find out. Let's do it and let's find out.
I mean,
where this
in
goes.
all reality, that's kind of ad nauseam, flip and see what you get.
It is. It's just done in such a different way. I will say that there's a bit of a distaste for it sometimes. A lot of people will call it like a masturbatory deck, or you're just playing by yourself. It's solitaire, and out of my experience playing against Cercara, at least, I don't think that it's that way, but that comes down to pilot too. Like, I think Joey's played it long enough that he can just be like bam, 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 bam. All these things happen, and then you're dead, or I pass turn. Whereas some people play like Joyra, and it's like eggs, and you're just like, okay, I draw this. Okay, I play this. Okay, I draw this, and then I play that, and then give me 5 minutes, and then and that shit's annoying, and that's how
we can all
a lot of the other cards are like.
we pregame to talk about this one. We can all agree that our least favorite offender in that exact category is Kark and Sokka fucking Shima.
God, it's really hard to play against that deck.
we universally hate that deck, and I would say
goldfish your deck a lot. Like get your interactions down, know how it works, please. That's
also, on a secondary note, any Thrasios Seedborn deck is basically the same shit. And like, please just fucking make your decisions quicker. Like, it's not that hard. Like, look at the top card. Do you need it? No, put it on the bottom and reveal the next one. It's not that difficult. You get to do it like 3 or 4 times on everybody else's turn. Have some consideration for everybody else that's playing the game. Which is also kind of part of the reason why I started playing stacks. It's because it was just like, you're going to do this shit. Okay, fuck you. You can only do it once a turn. Or you can't do it at all.
Yeah. I'm going to take away your guy's cradle, so you can't do that.
Otherwise, mono red tends to be like the Godo. Rionia, I have a buddy, Faded, that he has been trying to get his Rionia deck on the database for ages. They kept putting it on the Brewer's Corner, then taking it down. It's a good deck. It actually just top 16'd recent tournament, so like it's actually starting to post with some results. It's very much like a Kiki Jiki kind of deck. It's all creature combo, it's infinite combats, it's real easy to assemble, it's very fast, it's very resilient. You can also do stuff with like Jessica Dargo. I've seen Dargo Kedis. There's a lot of different ways to do shit with Dargo that's just like, you did what now? And then they just win, and it's pretty crazy. But generally, it is in most red decks that are stormy are relying on the impulse draw. They're relying on rituals. They're relying on things like Underworld Breach, but not necessarily Underworld Breach, like Mizzix's Mastery or Past in Flames or Bonus Round, things that allow them to copy spells or recast them from their graveyard to continue that storm. In the case of like your Cercara, you may be recurring things that do damage that further your impulsive draw, so it just keeps going and going and going until you win.
All of them also really rely heavily on their commander's abilities, something like Zada, Cercara, Bergi, all of them. Like,
I think every mono deck relies on their commander a lot.
That has to do with with the limitation in colors, but it is. They're all a big part of their engine. So
I've also never played mono green Storm. You're the only one with experience with that. I know you've played Sylvala, you've played Yeva. Do you have more to say about that as far as how you get that going? Obviously, it's creature based, but.
Yeah, I mean, like your Bro Storm is just like the mulligan is the hardest part because you really do need like a specific mix of things in a Sylvala mulligan. Just specifically about that one, you really need a big girthy, a tall boy, and then you need to be able to get Sylvala out at the latest turn 2, and then you need a payoff after that. So like you really need a good mix of those 3 things. To make that happen.
So did you just answer the question? Do you go long or do you go girthy? Did you say you go girthy?
No, you go. Actually, girthy is the wide one, right? I think long is the tall one. So I would go long.
Okay.
Yeah. Marwyn goes girthy. So we're thinking you're talking about like do you want a long tall creature or do you want to have girthy board?
A long pencil dick, or do you want to catch friction on a pickle jar? Like,
Yeah,
let's
so
see what happens.
Marwyn needs that wide board, so she goes girthy, you know?
Yeah, Marwyn for sure. Selvala is definitely more, it's not even really wide or tall, it's kind of just, it does its thing and then
All
wins.
creatures,
it's
man.
fucking crazy.
What's the new mono green creature that has like the Lotus Cobra ability that tutors elves or elementals? That's a new like mono green storm hotness that I've been playing against lately. I just can't think of what the fuck the card's called.
The new Nissa from
that one.
Aftermath? Yeah, I've heard about it. I haven't played against it yet.
I haven't played against it yet.
It's scary good. It can win on turn 2, turn 3 consistently, or it can attempt to if it's not stopped.
I know that one and the Narset and the Obnix were like the biggest ones from that set. Obnix, none of those have posted any tournament results yet that I am aware of, but they were
a lot
all
of people
very
are playing
hyped.
Obnix though.
It seems like it's
deck
popular.
will hit, I think, at some point.
People are saying it's better than Prosper, but I like Prosper better still.
It's way better than Prosper. I played them both. Anyway, that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
No, I hear you. I just don't like having to build around like doing 1 damage to shit, because 1 damage is piddly, and I'd rather have the impulsive plus like the treasures that I'm thinking about putting him in the deck.
That's fair. I don't like either of them personally. I like Florian better, but that's just me.
Florian's in my Prosper deck, so there you go.
There you go, as it should be.
We've come full circle.
There's the new green. What the hell is it again? We just said it.
Nissa.
Yeah, I can't think of what the hell it's resurgent.
You'd have to pull it up. I don't know.
Whatever it is. It's. I won't be surprised if at some point it posts results, just because when it's basically revolving around landfall and creature casting, that's a lot harder to interact with for a lot of decks. So that one's going to be interesting. I mean, it builds a Shia Aquarian Ranger Storm.
Right.
Yeah, it's really a Shia Aquarian Ranger. We should mention that with any mono green deck, because that is your win con most of the time now, right? Like,
it's also like one of the only win cons in Gruul, because Gruul just doesn't have win cons. So
yeah, if you're not doing that, then you're doing you're doing Temur Sabertooth stuff to get infinite mana, with Wirewood Symbiote, I guess it is.
Or what's the big 6 mana Tree Folk that untaps and gives everything +2/+2? You can do weird loops with that.
It's a good card as well. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much how you're winning the game. Then usually you're sinking all your mana into Finale of Devastation after you draw your deck. And
Finale was the thing now. I think prior to that it was probably doing like Craterhoof maybe. Speaking of Craterhoof,
Craterhoof still exists in Marwyn.
Some of them do. Most CDH decks aren't running Craterhoof, but sidebar, what do you guys think about the white Craterhoof? It's coming out with Eldraine. I would have to pull it up to actually read it.
Read to me. Great Oak Guardian is the other card, by the way.
Great Oak Guardian. That is. Yeah.
What was I thinking of? Heartwood something.
Heartwood Storyteller is the 3 mana 2/3 Tree Folk that like you draw when your opponent's cast non-creature spells or some shit.
God damn your memory.
I don't know what it is, but it's dog shit, and that's my opinion.
I mean, you're not wrong. It's not good in most cases, but it is. Moonshaker Cavalry. It's the same exact CMC as Craterhoof, but it's white. 3 white pips and 5. It's a Spirit Knight 6/6 flying. When it ETBs, creatures you control gain flying and gain +X/X till the end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control.
Okay, flying, not trample.
Flying instead of trample is fucking good. I don't care who you are. If you could cheat this fucker out, that's good.
Problem with it is, what's its creature type? It's elemental?
It's a spirit. It goes right into my fucking Millicent deck. It's the finisher for that deck that it didn't have before. Yeah. Because it already creates a bunch of fucking 1/1 spirits, and now, like, if you got 6 of them out, everything gets +6.
It's great with white, because white has a lot of like, it makes a weenie boards.
Yeah, and then
the biggest problem with it, though, if it's white, it's 8 mana. If it's green, if it's a green 8 mana spell, it's like every other color 4 mana spell, because green creates so much fucking mana. So
yeah, it is. It's tough. It's tough to get out there, but white decks should get to this amount of mana just by purely stacking the game out to the point where you can make the land drops, baby.
It's off. It's not good. It's not wholly CEDH play. Well, neither's Craterhoof. Nobody plays Craterhoof, really. It's not really a thing in CEDH that much.
I think it's just Marwyn. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah,
I don't know about any other ones.
I still like it. I'm gonna jam it in that deck, but that deck is arguably fringe anyway, so so let's continue with sidebar aside. Let's continue with mono colors. So we've done
red.
Well, everything beside. We're not going to talk about black because we already talked about Crick, and that's basically the only one. We got blue and white. Blue, I don't think white has anything that could. Teshar. Yeah.
That's artifacts. No, that's artifacts.
What's the other one? AO?
Sram.
Or fuck you said? That one also can do kind of storm stuff.
SRAM does storm stuff too, but it's very casual.
Artifacts. It's artifacts. Yeah.
So okay, blue.
Blue, you just have High Tide, which I played Jace, Prince Prodigy. I played
Orvar too. It does
fun deck
stuff, but
Candelabra of Thanos, and just.
I mean, Naru Meha kind of does storm stuff, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, I can see that, but overall,
I miss JVP. Miss that boy.
They're all kind of. It's kind of boring. It all pretty much relies on High Tide and being able to, or Peregrine Drake, and or whatever other thing you can do to. Flicker, ghostly flicker, that kind of stuff.
It's all like flicker storm type shit more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward, kind of boring. I don't think we really need to talk much more about it. White.
No.
How do you really feel about it, buddy?
Well, if it's not red or black, it's not.
Storm. I mean, have you seen the card Turnabout? Turnabout is a great storm card, but it's
there you go.
I cannot tell you what that does right off the top of my head, but I'm already bored of blue. So we'll move on to white. We have the same issue. Teshar, it's doing mostly artifact loops. It does exist, obviously, and it does do a thing. It used to be pretty strong. It just recently got downshifted, so the Pauper people are going crazy about it.
Oh, ow! How do you say that? Fucking AO. How do you pronounce that shit?
I think it's ow.
Ow. That hurts my brain. Yeah. Ow, hurts my brain. The Dawn, that one also does kind of White Storm.
Yeah, it does. I'm not as familiar with it. It was kind of popularized by Charles, and then I think he posted some kind of results with it, and I have not seen anybody talk about it since then. That also was like 2 years ago, fucking believe it or not. Like, Jesus Christ, it's been 2 years since Kamigawa. Like, what the fuck? And then SRAM, as we discussed, that was something I was really hoping to get downshifted, because that and CPDH would have been fucking busted, but SRAM is basically play equipment or an aura or a vehicle and draw card, so you pretty much don't care about the vehicle part, but it's a Voltron-y style deck. I built it years ago when he first came out, but just in casual. Did the whole thing. It's a lot of fun. You can draw a lot of cards, but it's Voltron-y style, so like you're probably not winning. You can probably put some kind of CDH sort of combo in there, but I don't know.
I mean, you've seen my list. My list is pretty busted. I only run like 25 lands, and it's just like, zero cost equipments, and you just roll through it, and then you hit Aetherflux Reservoir. Kill everybody.
That works. That works. I mean, I think it is probably still more on the casual side, but yeah. Mono white, honestly, when it comes down to it, mono red, mono black are the only ones that can really sufficiently do this, and those are the only lists that have posted any sort of results outside of Selvala. Selvala does the creature storm thing, which is fine, but overall, I'm kind of uninterested in mono colors as much as my sweet spot has always been 2-3 color. So let's move on to that. So moving on to 2 color.
Is it Boros, Gruul, or is it?
Yeah, so Boros, you've got Cole, like equipment.
Cole's the only one, yeah.
He's the only storm version of Boros, but there are some Boros decks that are pretty competitive, I would say. Obviously, we all know Winota's pretty good. I think that the Queen Kayla and the Naali builds that I made were pretty strong, just because they've finally given Boros some card advantage in the command zone.
I play a Zabaz Glimmer Wasp. It's like a Clan Ironworks kind of storm. So
that artifact wasp thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I run Gerard Weatherlight Hero as it's
that's a storm deck,
casual deck, but that is like a
it's an eggs deck. Yeah,
eggs and storm, kind of just replaying them, recurring them, however you can. And that deck,
I want to see your list now. I want to compare it to mine, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, that deck could probably break into Fringe, but it will never really, unless something is printed that's out of this world. And what's the 3-mana white creature that you combo with that brings back a legendary?
Loyal Apprentice.
No, that's
Loyal Retainers.
Loyal Retainers. Yeah, Loyal Retainers. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so I mean, unless something that
that just got reprinted. It's actually not $1 billion anymore.
Nice.
Yeah, unless something that's like that or like a second version of that essentially comes along, I don't think that it really is going to ever break in.
That is one thing that should be mentioned, is that like all of these decks exist because there's redundancy, and I think that's a big part of Storm in general, is just having redundancy for your combo pieces and your synergies and whatnot. If you only have one copy of a thing that does a thing, it like, I hate to jump to 3-color, but like Minsk is like a good example, because it went from having just the one Rector that got the enchantment to having the other Rector that goes and gets the new Vivian that does the same thing you want the deck to do. So getting that, like, kind of pushed it even farther over the edge. It was already good, but, like, that just made it even better. So things like that need to happen before you can really, like, say, okay, this deck is consistent enough to be
right.
CEDH. So, I mean, with Boros, we're definitely on Cole. If we jump over to Izzet, there's quite a bit. You know, you got Niv Mizzet Perrin is the big one. The older
I wouldn't call that a Storm necessarily, though. That's really just that's another kind of 2-card combo go there kind of deck.
It is, but
it's more control-y than Storm.
It is, but I feel like when it wins, that turn is a fucking Storm turn for the ages. It's not just like I did a bunch of stuff to win with a 2-card combo. It's like I did all of this shit over time. I don't know. Well, okay, better example than maybe.
I think Vayren.
Well, see, I think of like Vayren's probably more Stormy for sure. That's something that's like I built that, but that's with Dragon's Approaches, and then like all of the same sort of shit that like your Circara list does, but just having blue on top of it, so it's kind of the same sort of deal, but like slightly different. Also, Circara's in the 99 because like the impulsive draw, the copies and things are just
lots
good.
Of curiosity stuff.
That's definitely stormier, but I don't think Vayren itself is good enough to be CEDH. It's kind of still limited to casual. Whereas I think the Niv Mizzet, at least, maybe even not Niv Mizzet, maybe like Malcolm Kedis, but that's still kind of the same thing. You're still. It's not a 2-card combo. It's like, well, it is with
yeah. I mean, Izzet Malcolm is definitely a good deck as well. And it might not be stormy, but it's you could do breach stuff with it still. Like it.
Yep, and there's the Boogeyman of Kark and Sakashima. There's Joyra, the 4-drop one Cheerio loops. There's also the 2-drop one that does weird kind of stuff with artifacts. That one I haven't played in forever. Yusri is even kind of in that conversation, although not very many people play it.
Yeah, I remember when Steve was playing that for a minute. That was the coin flip one that if you drew, you could draw a bunch or do.
Then you can hit Omniscience essentially out of nowhere.
Yeah. Kark Sakashima is probably the epitome of Izzet Storm, as much as I hate to say that.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely the most popular deck of the Izzet Storm, so there's a reason for that.
The most popular, it's probably the most consistent, despite the fact that its randomization can fuck it harder than... Well, we won't go into detail, but...
Can we do anything in Gruul? Is there Gruul?
I think the only thing that Gruul really does that's stormy is what I do with Kodama and Tago, with the land thing. It is.
There's very
much, definitely is like,
very much Minsk and Boo, the Planeswalker.
Oh yeah, the planes. Yeah, that was. Yeah,
very much.
Definitely one.
That's Protean Hulk, which is kind of stormy. Yeah.
I think the way that it sets up is it shits out a bunch of mana and then it draws a bunch of cards off its hamster that it, you know.
In the case of Hulk is kind of a storm package in itself, which we haven't really gotten to because it's mostly 3-color. That's I think the only, that and Virals are the only 2-color like Hulk lists that do a thing. Otherwise in Gruul you've got like Snoop combo, which is sort of stormy, but like not really stormy. It's more of just like a combo line and less of a doing a bunch of random shit that ends in a win. Because like I think Storm, it kind of has that element of chaos that a combo line doesn't. Because a combo line is just I hit this thing, then I hit this thing, then I hit this thing, then I hit this thing. Which I guess in that rate Hulk maybe isn't Storm. We're learning all together here as we go because. In the same line, Hulk lines are the same generally every time, outside of if you drew a piece or whatever. The same thing with a combo like Conspicuous Snoop. It's the same pile every time, so it's maybe not Storm because there's not that random effect. So
only
I think
to set up, but
yeah. I don't know that any of those really constitute it. I can't think of anything else in Grohl that's doing anything really like that. So
we got to do our green 2 colors, so we still need to do.
Yeah. I'm missing my fucking
and
girl.
Azorius Storm and all that.
Azorius Storm, I don't think exists really. Maybe Wrath, Capuchin, something with Flash.
ISO Rev's a thing, so as long as ISO Rev is a thing, you can do Storm and anything with blue. Let's.
Sure. To be fair, Shurikai could, yeah.
Yeah, Shurikai, yeah. I think Simic has some decent Storm things that you can do with it. Like I've run Pure and Toothy, and I would call that a Storm deck, but
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
That's really it. But
I have an Azuri, the blue-green deck that's kind of stormy because you're doing a lot of actions in a turn, but it's not necessarily Storm. So.
Yeah.
Well, you have Enchantment Storm, so you have Selesnya. So
I was gonna say Selesnya, my girl, Sithis. She's a weird beast because it's not only is your commander giving you card advantage, and then a lot of the things that you're playing not really doing anything. Like they do stuff for you, but not necessarily like instantly. It's mostly you're getting the card draw off of it, which is very Storm-like. It's just play this garbage to draw more cards. However, I think I've curated the list well enough to where like what you're playing isn't garbage, but it's still like maybe not doing anything for you in that instant. It's just you're casting this to draw a card. But because enchantments are permanents, they stay on the field and they still affect the game, so you can play stacksy shit like Stony Silence. Now nobody can use artifacts, and I run a total of 3 in the deck, so it doesn't really affect me. Those are there to get her out or get early turn advantage and then not care about anymore. In the Orcish Bowmaster meta, I don't know that I'm not running a ton of dorks, so I'm not overly worried about it, but they are there. So far, I haven't run into it too much, but it is a thing that we have to live with now. I did recently put in the half lane because I've got like it's sub 10, but it's like closer to 10 than it is to 1 as far as legendary creatures go. I also put in that Flowering the Right Tree because that's a trigger off of Sithis for a draw that also makes Sithis into a 3/3 that also makes my whole board into either +2/+1 or +1/+1, gives Sithis ward, etc. So seems pretty good. Sithis eventually gets to a point where you either can make infinite mana and filter through a number of avenues to draw your deck, or play out all your creatures and then play a finale to win, or a number of 2-card combos that are not Storm, which is like Heliod Ballista and Siona, Shielded by Faith, or like this. Otherwise, it's like the Swift Druid combo and stuff that will get you that infinite mana to do things. And it's pretty consistent. It does help slow down faster decks at the table, so it's not really a stacks. It's very light on stacks, but it has just the right amount of hate bears and things to keep the turbo players off their game long enough for you to get to what you're going for. Tons of tutors, tons of ways to be consistent and redundant and all of that. So I think it is not necessarily like my best deck, but it is one I'm very proud of. It's got a lot of different ways to victory, and you know it has that random factor that Storm. I think it hits all of the things that we've defined so far today that makes a Storm deck. So outside of it, I don't really know that there's anything else in Selesnya that's doing combo. I mean, outside of
Daphne's Eric's Daughter is kind of a deck that can do something similar-ish with a lot of weird loops, but that's more activations than casting or anything.
Yeah. I mean, on another like degree, you could also use that Malira that had the sack clause to bring a thing back, so you could do Hulk piles with that, but that's still not very Storm. It's kind of more just activated stuff. Yeah, Selesnya, pretty much that's it. Azorius, we already said. Anything with Isochron. Boros, we already covered.
Yeah, we're good
covered.
On
yeah,
colors,
so we're on to 3 colors. I guess where you want to really talk about Treasure Storm is in Jund, and that's that big dragon guy called Corvold. And he does the thing to the point where it wasn't a Dockside deck, and then it became a Dockside deck, and that's like all it is now.
Yeah, it was a food chain deck. Now it's a Dockside deck.
Food chain's one we haven't really talked about. Like its big brother Prosh is on food chain, but yeah.
Well,
yeah, food chain
also 3-color. We hadn't got there yet. There's also my favorite, the Ukima Kazur, which is just have the outlet in the command zone on top of having food chain, so that's pretty good.
It's also like 3-color, Naya, Rocco, Storm, your bunch of creatures.
Oh yeah, Naya is definitely like it's like the more colors of Mono Green Storm, right? Like you're doing a lot of the same things with much better overall card quality.
Well, because you have the green stuff, you also have the Kiki Jiki stuff, you have Hulk, you have all the different things.
You have Dockside, really. Like Dockside unlocks so much in the format, and when you're already on green with a lot of mana.
Well, and then you're in white. If we're talking Naya, you're in white also with the silence effects, so you can just make sure nobody can interact with you.
Veil Summer, so yeah.
And still breach stuff. Yeah. If you really want it.
Absolutely. You can run it just because it's good. Not to win with it, just because you're like, oh well.
Wait a minute, it dies to removal. We determined it's not good.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're right.
It dies to the end of turn as well, but it's still fucking good.
Right, exactly. Thrasios Dargo is another kind of storm with their kind of bullshit.
Yeah. I've seen Thrasios Kark, man. I mean, I've seen some...
Thrasios Rog is like the new hotness, and that's doing like either polymorph or some other stuff. But yeah, being able to cast a 0-drop that can be polymorphed into something beefy to win, and that's a whole storm archetype that we haven't touched on. Is the whole
we totally skipped over that with the Hull Breaker.
Polymorph
with Mono Blue with Urza.
Sure. I was gonna say it's not really represented too much in the lower color combinations, but Urza is one that does it.
I think polymorph. I mean, Shorekai does it as well. We talked about Shorekai, but we just talked about it. The Scepter.
I don't play polymorph in my Shorekai. That's why I didn't think about it.
I mean, I personally would, if I was gonna play Shorekai, I wouldn't play polymorph. I would play. I like
Isorev, but then we also talked about it in a recent podcast. Some people play it with Humility, which is interesting, but not my favorite idea. But it's a card.
Humility is a quite a card. Like
it does.
It's getting better and better.
I've seen people do that with their Jessica Ishai deck, right? Because then you amass a big bunch of counters on Ishai, and then it doesn't matter if it's a 1/1 with no abilities. You just use Jessica to kill people with it, as long as it's a 7/7. So
yep. Or if worst case scenario, if you can't get your big bird out, you can just kill everything with Jessica because they're all 1/1. So
yeah.
We also have stuff like Elsha, which is basically a step up from Joyra if you're in Jeskai. The card I talked about earlier, that newer Narset, even older Narset, is still sometimes played. That does the whole cast shit off the top of your library for free, and then just it's kind of non-deterministic. Either it gets there, or it doesn't. That's something we didn't talk about either. Was Edric with turns? That can be very stormy as well. We're gonna miss a bunch of these because there's so many fucking commanders out there that are all doing these different things.
Jeskai, I think it's you have to talk about the Spellseeker combo, the 1-card combo. You guys.
Well, that's also Grixis, because Inala that's where the first place I ever saw a Spellseeker 1-card combo.
Well, yeah, but any Jeskai list can run the Spellseeker 1-card combo. All you need to do is be able to cast Spellseeker and have red, white, after you cast it to win the game, or you can wait till the next turn. But you cast Spellseeker, get Ephemerate, and then you Ephemerate your Spellseeker. And then you get Final Fortune, you cast Final Fortune, then you rebound your Ephemerate on your final turn, and you flicker for Enlightened Tutor.
I have no idea how you... It's like 32 fucking steps, and you remember this much of it.
And then you...
I'd have been done after step 2.
You just keep going, and you get Enlightened Tutor, and you pretty much cast the Enlightened Tutor before your draw step. You get your Breach, and you do the whole thing from there. And it's pretty insane. All you need is, like I said, be able to cast Spellseeker and red, white, and you just win the game.
Yeah, you need quite a bit of mana on the next turn as well to pull off the loop, but it is pretty easy to do.
Right? Yeah.
I wrote it up a long time ago in my deck list primers, and I haven't touched that deck in forever, so I would have to dust it off to look at it.
I had it in Orvar. There was a line in Orvar, and I remember I put it in my primer.
If you're running Dockside, Ephemerate's pretty good already, so it's not.
Yeah. What about one color combo we haven't really touched on 3-color Tayum?
Well, the first time I ever saw Tayum played was Mike. Mike played it, and his was a pretty stormy list in the sense of taking a lot of actions and taking a long turn and getting there. The last time I played against Tayum was recently, and it was stack. So It's versatile, it seems.
So yeah, the difference I think between Thyme and Kinnan, the reason why I would say it's more stormy than Kinnan is because Kinnan you have X amount of mana, so you have X amount of activations, and you just do them, and you see what you flip, and you put them on the field. Whereas
and if you get Thrasios, then you win.
With Thyme, every single time you do a loop, you're milling more cards, right? Is generally
it's less deterministic. Yep.
So like you're milling more cards, you're getting more resources. You could snowball that into a victory depending on what you hit, because like a lot of your loops are mana neutral, like you're using Ashnod's Altar or whatever it is like that to like make it neutral, and you're just like digging for cards. Whereas Kinnan, you have this much mana to activate per turn, and you do it, and that's it.
Yeah, I think I mean, it is non-deterministic in the sense that you are randomly gonna see X amount of cards and either whiff or not. And in that sense, it's the same as like Winota or anything else that looks at cards off the top of your deck that may or may not get you value. That's not Storm. Storm is more of like, I'm taking these actions and it's doing more stuff for me, and then yada yada. Well, I mean, it's almost the same fucking thing though. It's hard to determine because they're very similar, but I feel like Thyme is more leaning towards Storm than Kinnan, but is it? Like, I mean, if we're going to define a stormy turn as just taking a fuck ton of actions and then winning the game, any of these things can be fucking Storm. As long as it's not a 2-card win con, you know? And even then, it could still be Storm, because it could be, you did this, you did that, you did this, you did that, then you found a tutor, then you tutor for that, then you did this, then you did that, then you did this, then you tutor for the other piece, then you did this, then you did that, then you played both the pieces and you won. That's a Storm turn. That's Storm. But
that's Adnaz in a nutshell, right there.
And also Storm is not a thing that happens every single fucking turn. It's you build up to a point, you look like you're doing fuck all, everybody's leaving you alone, unless you're in black, because then they're hitting you because they know you have Adnaz. But if you're in any of these other colors, they're leaving you alone because you look like, oh, poor him, he missed his land drop, he's only got 5 mana, the rest of us got 7. We're not going to do anything to him. And then he's like, boom, I win. And you're like, god damn. Or boom, 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 more accurately. But you know what I'm saying.
Fair.
There's a lot of other things, too. I mean, we could probably talk about this for another, like, 2-3 hours.
I think the main thing is with like, if you're playing a Storm deck, you're thinking with an aggressive mind, I'm going to go load up on resources, essentially, and try to have one big turn. Like, if that's the archetype of your deck.
Right.
Like, I'm building up so that my big turn is turn 3, and I'm going to, just go off then, or my big turn in this mulligan is turn 2.
I mean, and that's kind of how Hulk and some of those, Food Chain and a lot of those things work. It is only one card, but then you take all these extra actions. Because you do with like, my Hulk pile, or my Hulk combo, and miss is like, play this creature, sacrifice this creature to my commander that already had to be out, that already made this other creature, because that's just what he does. Sack this thing, put this other thing that I tutored up onto the hamster, then sack the hamster with my commander to go get this other thing, then do this thing, sack that, go get these 3 things, then do this thing to recur that, sack it again, then get these 3 things, then do this, do that, do this, and then win. Right? So that's almost the definition of Storm, is we built up to this point where we have this Storm turn. So I think in that way, pretty much any of the decks that we've discussed today are pretty much in the vicinity. They may not be an exact Storm deck, but they are going that direction in the sense of being aggressive, being low mana costs, being able to aggressively mulligan, having a lot of redundancy, etc. Synergies, yada yada. There's a bunch of shit we didn't touch on, but
here I can give us a last closing question. Would you rather your Storm deck or your Adnaz deck be built to protect its Storm turn with a like counter spells like in blue, or would you rather be in Grixis or Mardu? Like would you counter spells or silence effects and other like types of resiliency, through Grand Abolisher or Ranger Captain. Which do you think is in a stronger position right now?
That's a really good question. It's so hard with all of the new stuff. I mean, the Boseijus and the Otawaras and other channel twins, hot snipers of the world that can stop a Grand Abolisher type effect that then opens up the interaction. But depending on the storm turn, Boseiju can still screw your Underworld Breach in the middle of a turn where you're protected by counter spells. So that's a really good question. Me personally, God, that's hard. I'm probably leaning toward Grixis, just having blue, having counter magic, because I feel like I like counter magic in games in general. I like being able to stop my opponents, whereas not just protect my own turn. I mean, I know Silence can be an amazing card on other people's turns as well, but Grand Abolisher not so hot on other turns. So that's me. What about you?
I lean towards Mardu. Okay, so my top if I had to pick make a top, like a list, like top 3 is Mardu, Grixis, and Esper. Esper wasn't until Tivit, but it was when Zur was a big thing. It was very high on my list, but then Underworld Breach and other things got printed to where Esper was like, you're not playing with the best shit in the format. Like, you probably should be playing Grixis because then you have all of it. And I get that. You losing out on Dockside and Underworld Breach is hard, but like Tivit just makes it so easy, honestly. And there's other decks that probably also make it easy and have their own little like thing that subs in for those things, and it is what it is. But yeah, I find that my favorite Turbo Nas deck is Mardu. It's Tymna Rograk. That's my favorite deck. It even though I have a Tevish Crom, I have even though it's not Turbo, I have the Evelyn list. I built that fucking Sauron list that still runs Adnaz and whatever. So, like, I have decks that do it, but as far as, like, a dedicated Turbo Nas list, my Mardu deck is my favorite. Probably followed by, like, Tivit, and Tivit's not even a Turbo. Like, I could cut Adnaz tomorrow from Tivit and not give a shit. So, yeah. It doesn't even care. But yeah, for me, it's Mardu.
My answer is just play both. Play Blue Farm.
I mean, yeah.
No, I don't even play Blue Farm, so I prefer Mardu as well, but I have a Grixis deck that I like a lot too. Like, I think you have to see both angles of it, and playing both of them kind of makes you a better player, but at the same time,
the silence over the counter spells feel better to me. I love the silence effects, and they've given us so many of them, because there was already silence, there's abeyance, there's fucking the Orange Chant as well. There's Ranger Captain. I've rated that as like maybe possibly the best white card ever printed.
It could be.
Grand Abolisher's good. There's the back in Mardu. You get the backside of that Flame Scroll Celebrant. That's also a silent. Like, there's so many silence effects that if you really wanted to go that route, you can have almost the same amount or density as you would with counter spells.
But they're they're not as useful in the terms of, like, you can't use them to stop other people. You can't stop
other people. Yes, you can.
If somebody
has
a win on the stack, you're not. Well, yeah, but if somebody has a win on the stack, then and you try to silence them, it's usually too late.
It is the all-in. I think I like Mardu because it is the all-in. It's just like Rakdos. It's the all-in mentality that I prefer over the play it safe, play reactively. I don't want to play reactively when I play Storm. I want to go all in. I'm going to smash my head into that wall, and I'm going to make them have it. And if they don't have it, I win. If they have it, well, maybe I try to win next turn, or I just lose. And then we shuffle up and play another game.
And the decks I'm doing that exact strategy / playstyle with are Mono Black and Crick, and Mono Red and Godo. Those two decks I play. That's kind of my all-in, balls to the wall, see what happens. I'd rather play those if I'm going that strategy than Mardu Adnaz for me.
I prefer to have the extra colors, but I get you. And those decks do their thing enough.
Yeah. Crick is like the prototypical Storm deck at this point, right? Like, that is like kind of exactly right
it's bonkers. I played it only a couple times and I was like, holy shit, this deck is wild. All right, so closing thoughts. I have one last question. We kind of answered it here, but like, just you can give me a one-word answer. You can give me multiple diatribes. Doesn't matter. When it comes to Storm, do you prefer Turbo, which is, as we've defined, the very aggressive balls to the wall, or mid-range? which I guess sums up what we were just talking about nicely.
Yeah, I'm more in the turbo. I like the Mardu. I'm all about that. And the Rakdos. Like I've played Rakdos Adnaz. I've had a Rakdos Adnaz deck the entire time I've played CDH. So I gotta go with my roots.
Yep.
With those guys.
Kirk.
Yeah, for me, it's mid range. That's just me.
And the reason why we brought Joey on this podcast is that I'm also... I needed somebody to break the tie between us, so I brought Joey on just so I could be like, Turbo wins. Turbo wins. All right, well, we meandered a lot. We went all over the place. We didn't talk about your favorite commander, so you can let us know about that in the comments. We have probably also missed, like, 1,500 other fucking decks. It is what it is. We get a little bit of a cattail there for the exit.
Displacer Kitten Storm. There you go.
Yeah, just Displacer Kitten just happened.
Yeah, Displacer Kitten Natali Storm. There it is.
That's our take on Storm. Like I said, meandering conversation. We talked about a lot of different stuff. Your mileage may vary as far as what you like. I guess question of the week. 2 questions for this episode. Do you like Sarah Ascendant or not? And do you prefer Turbo, Storm, or mid-range wait and be safe and be a pussy?
No bias there at all.
No bias at all. Also, Sarah Ascendant rocks. Y'all know what we think. Let us know what you think in the comments below. You can also comment on Reddit posts, Twitter, etc. I post all over the fucking place. Let us know. We will read your comments and give you some feedback as to what you said. So, either way, thank you so much, Joey, for joining us. This is great. It was a little weird trying to navigate 3 people because I usually just talk over Kirk over and over again, and in this case, we all talked over each other. So, hey, awesome. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. We may, as I said, turn this into a series. Talk about stacks, talk about control, talk about aggro. Who knows? We'll see what we can think of. Either way, We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Enjoy, comment, like, subscribe, all the bullshit. We'll see you later.